Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kahler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to another episode. And I'm excited about this particular series because it's something I've never talked on before. And I'm thinking those of you that are listeners to the podcast are going to be the first ones. I'm writing a column, probably a couple columns on it, and started them today. And so my thoughts aren't completely well developed around this. And as you know, this podcast is not scripted. It's me thinking on the fly and just having a conversation with you, although it's very much one way, right? So it's from that angle that I want to approach this. So let me give you a little lead up to this. I teach a graduate course at Golden Gate University once a year. And the name of the course is Facilitating Financial Health. And of course, it's the textbook of the course happens to be the book that I co-authored with Ted and Brad Klontz by the same title. So it's kind of unique, I think, that a professor gets to teach a course using their book as a text. I'm certainly intimately aware of the author's thoughts on everything. And it probably can provide a challenge to the students as well. I tell them that they can disagree with the authors anytime that they'd like. So in the course of teaching this last time, we were in the chapter that talked about making referrals out to therapists or financial therapists. And just exploring the issues with that, difficulties, how you approach it. And one student said, well, I'd be really reluctant to refer out to a therapist since, and I quote, many people may have had a bad experience with therapy. And when I first saw that, I kind of bristled. I was a little taken aback because I'm thinking, well, how can you, just in a nanosecond, like how can you have a bad experience with therapy? I have spent probably the better part of the last 30 years in therapy myself, for facilitating therapy for others, and have seen it as such a huge positive and makes such a huge difference in people's lives. And I wouldn't be hesitant to recommend somebody to therapy. I might be over anxious, in fact, to recommend that. So I have found therapy to be a very positive and life-changing experience. But I thought I'd do a little research on that. Well, I wonder in what percent of the cases therapy fails. How common is therapy ending up in failure? And as I began to Google that and find some various sites, I came across one that was a blog post, I believe, by Scott Miller, who's a psychologist. And he stated he believes 5 to 10% of people that sign up for therapy, engage a therapist, get worse. get worse. And 35 to 40% don't experience any benefit whatsoever. So that's half or more of people that don't experience any benefit from therapy or get worse. Well, he seemed to be a pretty credible person, but I continued to search. I think I ended up on a American Psychological Association site, APA. And they had a site that somewhat confirmed this, that found that 25% of people who engage in therapy don't receive any benefit. Now, that would mean 75% do. So if we just took these two sources, we could conclude that 50 to 75% of people receive benefit. But I just was really curious to explore why therapy may fail, why people may be in therapy and get no benefit. And then, of course, as I often find out, I am guilty of the very things that I often spot in other people. There's a saying, I don't know if I said it on the podcast, I've had to. In therapy, if you spot it, you got it. I hate that. I hate that phrase. I actually ran into that in my own therapy session this week. And I was like, oh no, I've been very critical of another person in saying or not addressing an issue. Like, okay, if I address it, then that means it will happen. And critical of them not preparing and being proactive. And upon deep reflection, I found an area in my life where I was doing the same thing. So as I began to reflect on therapy failing, it took me back to the very first time that I engaged a therapist. And I'm trying to remember the year. It just sticks in my mind. Oh, it might have been around 1982-ish, sometime in there. And my marriage was suffering at that time. I think my wife had moved out, and I decided maybe I should try and fix things. And of course, the problem was really her. If she would get fixed, everything would be fine, which we'll get to in a minute. That's one of the reasons therapy can fail. But I remember pulling into his house. He did therapy out of his house. And oh man, I mean, even making the call was the hardest call I ever made in my life. And walking in the door, and I didn't recognize it as such at the time, but just overcome with shame, because only failures need therapy. And I didn't see myself as a failure, but I had to confess that things weren't going well in my marriage. And I remember meeting with him. I knew him from the community. And he was a very well-known therapist psychologist in my town. And so I don't remember a lot of the session, but I do remember him saying, "So Rick, why do you need to feel that you're in control of everything?" And that statement just dumbfounded me. Like, it's kind of like, to me, saying, "Rick, why do you think you need to breathe?" Or, "Rick, why do you think you need to put your pants on one leg at a time?" I mean, it was just like, everybody wants to be in control. I mean, I just remember that. And I believe I asked him how many sessions this would take before things were fixed. And I went for 2 sessions and then called it off. After the second session, I never went back. And I don't think I called him to say I wasn't coming back. I'm not sure. I'm not clear how I ended that, but I ended it. So for me, therapy had failed. It was not a good experience and nothing I ever wanted to do before. So there I was faced with kind of prima facie evidence that I was one of those that this student referred to. So I thought it would be interesting to ponder, why does therapy fail? And here's my challenge in doing this is I found a lot of different studies and things on therapy failing and what people wish they'd known before they went to a therapist. And what I want to do is apply that to financial therapy. So the similarities are huge, far more similarities as to why traditional therapy fails and financial therapy fails. But there are a few nuances. So my goal here is to apply this to financial therapy. And while I've been involved in financial therapy for a long time, I've only been doing the deeper form of financial therapy, which is IFS, Informed Financial Therapy, for I had about 2 years now. So let's kind of dive into that and explore with me. And I think the first reason that financial therapy would fail is in response to a question I get a lot. And what the question I get is, how do you know if you need financial therapy? And my answer is, well, if you're stuck around a financial decision, you probably can benefit from financial therapy. And then usually somebody will follow up with, well, who doesn't need financial therapy? Because I maintain that just about anybody can benefit from financial therapy. And my answer is always the same. It's the person that doesn't want to be in financial therapy. And so that's the first reason that financial therapy would fail, is that the client doesn't want to be there. Now, I'm going to guess this would be the number one reason why therapy or financial therapy doesn't work. And you might be saying, well, Rick, if you engage a financial therapist, why in the world would you not want to be there? This was almost comical in my class. One of the students, we were talking about the reasons people don't follow through, don't actually do what's recommended in it. And one of the students was like, I just can't wrap my head around this. Why would anybody be paying for financial planning advice and not follow it? And of course, it's obvious this particular student has not been engaged in the financial planning profession, because that's the very reason that the Nasrudin Project was founded in 1995 or so. It was a group of financial planners that got together saying, you know, about 1/3 of our clients are not following our brilliant advice. They've told us what their goals are, what they want to accomplish. We come up with beautiful financial plans that do that, and then they don't follow through. What is going on? So people engage professionals all the time and don't follow their advice. How many people don't follow their doctor's advice? How many people don't follow their lawyer's advice or their accountant's advice? I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous. So the fact that a person comes to a financial therapist and really wanting to be there is kind of a myth. More than not, people want to hear a specific affirmation of what they've already concluded is correct. But I'm kind of digressing here a little bit because I'm really thinking of the person that's in financial therapy who is in some manner, quote, forced to be there. It could be a partner. You're in a relationship. Your partner absolutely wants to get financial therapy and in some way issues an ultimatum that their partner will come with them or will get that therapy. I think in situations I've seen it is where a parent wants to stop enabling or change their behaviors in enabling kids financially. And they insist that the kid comes and is part of the financial therapy session. And typically the kid has no desire to see things change and doesn't want to be there. So it could be that somebody is sent to financial therapy kind of again as some ultimatum. I received a call once from some business partners, and one business partner said we need financial therapy, and the other one was absolutely no, and he wanted to engage me, and I refused the assignment, just saying, I can't. I can do individual financial therapy with a person, but it's individual. It's not for the couple. And if you don't have a couple willing to be there, you've got one strike against you before you even get started. So I think that's probably the number one reason is a person does not want to be there. It was not their choice. It did not come from deep within them. And I'm not talking about the shame that a person feels when they have made that appointment, because calling a therapist, calling a financial therapist is probably the hardest phone call that a person can make, or certainly one of the hardest. And there's a ton of shame. There's a ton of shame when people engage a financial planner. I never realized that until I started doing this work. So you can want to be there, but that doesn't mean that every part of you wants to be there. There's parts of you that absolutely wish you didn't have to do this or weren't doing this. So, but I'm talking about the person who doesn't make the call, who is in some way required, forced, guilted, or manipulated to be in financial therapy. The second reason that therapy may fail would be a lack of skills on part of the therapist. And that kind of brings a responsibility home, doesn't it? But just like in every profession, whether it's an attorney, an accountant, financial planner, or doctors, there's differences. And I used to have the notion, the belief that they were all the same. They were all competent. And as I started being in the business world and experiencing these professions more and more, it was kind of popped my denial, my balloon, that they weren't all the same. There were those that were incredibly skilled, and there were those that you wondered, did they really go to school? So similarly, there's a wide gap of skills and training amongst therapists. And I think even more so with financial therapists, because financial therapy is more complex than regular therapy, because there's the requirement on the part of the therapist that they understand financial planning, that they understand finance. And if they're going to be a certified financial planner, they need to have at least a rudimentary understanding of either finance or therapy, and an in-depth understanding of one of those areas. So all therapists have their specialization. They have areas where they don't have training. Some therapists specialize in anxiety, others in bipolar, others in couples, others in sexuality. And so financial therapy is a specific specialization. Like financial planners can have their areas of specialty. Financial therapists can have an area of specialty, say, in cash flow or debt, and know very little about complex estate planning, say, perhaps. And then they can have their modality on the therapeutic side. Some of them will have a master's degree in therapy, others won't. And the challenge here is for somebody to call themselves a financial therapist, there's absolutely no licensing, no legalities around calling yourself a financial therapist. There is around being a certified financial therapist, which is right now level 1, which soon will be a certified financial therapist. But anybody can call themselves a financial therapist. So it really requires the consumer to do a lot of work to ascertain the financial therapist's skills both in finance and in therapy. And I'll get to some of the modalities a little bit later. I can see this is going to be a two-part. I think I can get in one more. The third is a lack of understanding of what therapy is. A psychologist once told me that the purpose of therapy was to be able to objectively tell your story. And I was just kind of left with a, what did you just say? Response to that. Like, huh? I thought that was a pretty weird way to describe the purpose of therapy. Now, today I understand a little more about what he meant, because the key there is objectivity. A lot of folks think that therapy is a place to where you come vent your story about what's happening, and venting inherently is unobjective, right? Or subjective. Venting typically is all focused on the other person and how if they would change, life would be great. Now, I'm not saying that venting isn't necessary in therapy. It usually happens early in therapy, but eventually venting needs to be turned inward, and that may be a wrong way to say this. There needs to be a U-turn done on venting, because there is no progress that's going to happen until I begin looking at my 100% responsibility of the 50% in a relationship. And with money, I can vent. It's just like a relationship of a couple, right? You can be venting about all your financial problems, and the problem is money. The problem is the employer. The problem is society. The problem is how messed up laws are around taxes or whatever it is. The problem is money, so to speak. And there needs to be a realization that that's not going to change, that we have no control over money or systems or governments or other people when it comes to money. That the only thing I can control is my reaction to the situation. The only thing I can control is what am I responsible for? What can I change? What is it that I can't change? What is it that I have the power to change? And usually I only have the power to change myself and my specific circumstances that I can control. So therapy is about gaining perspective and objectivity around your story. And financial therapy is the same. What is my part of this problem? How can I take myself out of the victim seat that it's always being done to me and take charge of my behaviors? Another thing that I think is interesting in therapy failing because of a lack of understanding of what therapy is all about, many people expect therapists to give them advice, especially financial therapists. And most therapists will not do that. Now, that's not to say that a financial therapist won't give financial information, that they won't give financial education, because they will. That's part and parcel of financial therapy. But rarely will a financial therapist say, this is what you need to do to fix your problem. While there is often a right financial decision, like for example, if a person wants to pay off debt, it is always the best financial outcome to pay off the highest interest rate debt first. But that is not precisely what every person, quote, should, end quote, do. You, the consumer, the client, is the ultimate decision maker and ultimately knows what's best when they're presented with all of the information. So, all right, well, we got through 3 of 10. Let's carry this on into the next episode. So, I will look forward to talking with you then. Thanks for joining me, Rick Kahler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.